This is a continuation of Each Man Kills by Victoria Glad, comprising the second part and the end. She bent over me solicitously, and I reached up to stroke that smooth black hair. It had a familiar feel to it that I couldn't quite place. Of course, I had stroked it hundreds of times before, but it wasn't that. Then she looked straight at me, those large, glowing hazel eyes boring into mine, and I knew and disbelieved at the same time. I froze where I lay, paralyzed by my fear, unable to make a sound. "So you know," she whispered. "It is well. I have marked you for my own these many months. Now that you know, you will not fight. You know what I am, or at least you can guess. This pin you admired, so it was mine 300 years ago, and it will always be mine." Her lips were on mine. She had never kissed me like this. It was like the touch of hot ice, freezing, then searing, unendurable. I lay inert. I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. I could scarcely breathe. Then I felt the blood within me pounding, pulsing, beginning to answer in spite of myself. I tasted once more the warm, salty fluid on my lips. Eve's body was liquid in my arms, warm, heady, narcotizing. Once again I felt the agonizing, dagger-sharp pain in my throat and darkness. Have you ever wakened to a bright, sunny afternoon and heard yourself pronounced dead? They spoke in low, hushed tones. How unfortunate. Young fellow, only 30, dying so far away from his homeland. No family. Good thing he was well set in life. This sudden anemia was most extraordinary. Fellow showed no signs of it previously. All he had really needed was rest. If he had recovered, that lovely Eve Orkaji might have made both their lives happier, richer. Sad ending to what might have been an idyll. Good of her to claim the body. She said she was going to inter it in the family vault in Königstein Mountain in Transylvania. I heard them distinctly. I wanted to shout that I wasn't dead. I wanted to wake up from this horrible nightmare. I was as alive as they. I knew I had to get out of there some way, to get away from Eve, whom I now feared. They left to make arrangements. The lassitude crept through me without warning. I dozed in spite of myself. And I dreamed again. I was a cat running, leaping through windows, loping over the countryside, stopping for no one. I panted with my exertions. Towns and cities flew by. I had to get someplace and quickly. Then the dream ended. "Todd," she said, "get up, my dear." I heard her and I hated her while I was drawn to her. There was a white mist before my eyes. I reached up to brush it away. It was not a mist, it was a cloth. I shivered. "I must wake up," I whispered hoarsely. "I must. I'm going mad." There was a creaking sound and daylight descended upon me. When I saw where I was, I covered my face with my hands and sobbed. I tried to pray, but the words froze on my lips. I was sitting in a coffin in a mausoleum. I had been buried alive. "What am I?" I shrieked. "Where am I and what have you done? I'm out of my mind, stark, staring mad." Eve's lips parted, showing the even white teeth, those slightly pointed teeth. "You're quite sane, my dear," she said calmly. "You are now one of us, a revenant, even as I, and to live you must feed on the living." "It's not true," I shouted. "This is all a crazy nightmare, part of my illness. You're not real. Nothing is real." "I'm quite real, Todd. To be trite, I am what I am, and have accepted it calmly, as you shall in time. I have told you of my life. You have been a student of legends. Legends are often, more often than you think, reality. When one has been murdered, if one has lived a so-called wicked life, he is doomed to walk the earth battening on the living. My fate was sealed as I lay in my coffin. But that wasn't enough. As I lay there, my pet cat, Suma, slunk into the room and leapt over me. That was a double insurance of my life after death. Those whom I mark for my own must too live on. Accept it, my dear. You have no other choice." "No!" I cried. "I'm an American. Things like this don't happen to us. It's only in stories and then to foreigners." She chuckled dryly. "I'm afraid these things do happen, and in this case, you're it, my dear. Make the best of it." But I wouldn't. I refused to for a while. I would not feast on the blood of the living. Something within me fought, for a time. Then the awful hunger began. The tearing pangs of hunger that ordinary food wouldn't arrest. I fought it as long as I could. I lost. First it was small animals, animals that I loved. It was my life or theirs. Then there was a little girl, a dear little creature who might have been my child under different circumstances. After the episode of the little girl, Eve left me. She had no further use for me. She had wanted the child too, and I had got it. I was now competition to be shunned. I was alone once again, alone and thoroughly miserable. I couldn't understand myself, my motives, so how could I expect someone else to understand? I only knew what I was, nor could I rationalize on why I had become this way. I could only presume it had happened to others equally as innocent as myself of wrongdoing. In the daytime, when I was like others, I reproached myself. Goodness knows I loathed myself and what I had to do in order to live. I wished I might really die, for I was tired, so frightfully tired and sick of it all, but I knew of no way to accomplish this, so I had to bear it all, fasting until my voracious, disgusting appetites got the better of me. I decided there must be some information on my kind, particularly in this area where vampire legends are rife, so I took to haunting reading rooms. It was there I met Maria. She told me, after we knew each other better, that she was doing graduate work in regional superstitions and had decided that her thesis would treat of the history of vampirism. She found it terribly amusing, but at the same time frightening, didn't I? I fear I saw nothing laughable about it, but I held my peace. Why, I could have done a thesis for her that would have driven some mild-mannered prof completely out of his mind. I kept my knowledge to myself, though. I didn't want to scare Maria. She was like a flash of sunshine in a darkened room. She made each day worth living. For the first time, the hunger pangs ceased for 1 week, then 2. I was certain I was cured. Perhaps, I thought, the whole thing was just a dream, and I am finally awake. I felt then I had the right to tell her of my love. She looked infinitely sad. She wasn't certain, she said. She knew she was awfully fond of me, but she was confused. She had just come away from the States, trying to make up her mind about someone dear, whom she didn't want to hurt, and she wanted a breather. I said I would wait up to and through eternity, if she wished. Things went along peacefully then. We would walk for hours together, walk in complete silence and understanding. My strength seemed to be returning more day by day. We went far afield in search of material for her thesis. She would track down the most minute speck of hearsay to get authenticity. One day, in our wanderings, I thoughtlessly let myself be led too near my resting place. One of the locals mentioned a place of horror nearby, and Maria wanted to investigate. I had no choice. We poked amid the still fustiness of the deserted mausoleum I knew so well. She thought it odd that the door was unlocked. I said, "Yes, wasn't it?" Then she saw the box, that gleaming copper box which Eve had so thoughtfully provided. She stroked it gently, commenting on its beauty, and before I could prevent it or divert her attention, she had lifted the heavy lid, exposing the disarranged shroud, the remains of 1 or 2 hapless small creatures, the horrible blood-stained satin lining. She screamed and dropped the lid, somehow pinching her finger. She hopped on 1 foot, as one usually does to fight down sudden pain. Then she was clinging to me, thoroughly frightened. "What does it mean, Todd?" I quieted her with the usual platitudes. Then I was kissing that poor, red little finger. Without warning to myself or her, I nipped it affectionately. A warm glow spread through me. There was a taste more delightful than fine old brandy or vintage wine, and I knew irrevocably that I was not cured, no, nor ever should be. And I knew, too, that I wanted Maria, not just as a man longs for the woman he loves, but to drink of the fountain of her life, that warm, intoxicating fountain, greedily, joyously. She never knew what went through my mind at that moment. If I could have killed myself then, I would have, and with no compunction. But there is more to killing a revenant than that. The church knows the procedure. I hurried Maria home as fast as I could and told her I had to go away for a week on business. She believed me and said she would miss me, but I didn't go away. That night I fought a losing battle with myself, and then and every night thereafter I returned to her, partook of her, and slunk away, loathing myself. I knew that I must soon kill the one being I loved above all others, kill, too, her immortal soul, and there was nothing I could do to prevent it. She began to fade visibly. When I returned in a week, she was so ill that a few steps tired her. Her appetite all but vanished. She seemed genuinely glad to see me. She was beset by nightmares, she said. Could I help her get some rest? I took her to a physician who sagely prescribed a change in climate, rest, and a diet rich in blood and iron, gave her a prescription for sedatives, and called it a day. You know how she looked when you saw her? The day was approaching when she would have no more blood, when life as you know it would stop and she would become like me. Somehow I couldn't take her with me without some warning, but I didn't know how to do it. You see, since I was an innocent victim myself, I could speak, could warn my intended victim, because although my soul had all but died, there was still a spark that evil hadn't touched. I knew she would think it a joke if I told her about myself without warning. Then, happily for me, you came along. I knew you had sensed something amiss and I didn't care. I was almost certain of her love, and I decided to seize the few minutes left me and devil take the hindmost. When you told her to confront me, you gave me the happiest days of my life. For this I thank you sincerely. For what I have done and will ask you to do, forgive me. Maria asked me directly, as you had known she would. I replied frankly, sparing her nothing. I told her that the fact that this life had been wished on me, as it were, gave me some rights, and that I could tell her how to rid herself of me if she wished. Then she turned to me, her large, lovely eyes thoughtful. "Todd, dearest," she said softly, "I must die someday, really die, so what difference does it make when? I only know that I love you. Why wait until I'm decrepit and alone, with only a few memories to look back on? Why not now, with you, where life doesn't really stop? With all I've read about this, don't you think I could free myself if I wished?" I still wonder if she really believed me. We were married 3 days later. I never told her what her life with me would be like, that one day I would desert her, fearing and hating her rivalry for the very source of my life, and the ghastly chain would continue. I couldn't. I loved her so, Morris, can you understand that? I couldn't betray her then, and I can't now. On the second night of our marriage, she died as you know it, in my arms. I don't think she knows it yet, but it won't be long until she does discover it. We were quite alive when you found us. She was in an hypnotic state induced by her condition. She heard and saw nothing. But I knew, and I must keep my faith. I must, and you are the only one who can help me. If you will show this to a priest, he will gladly accompany you to the place in Königstein, where we rest during the morning in a new bed I had specially constructed for us. I couldn't bring Maria to that other bed of corruption. A map of how to get there is enclosed. There you will perform the ancient effective rites, and you will lay us to rest together, as we wish. That is all I ask. When I had finished reading, I stared at nothing, trying to force myself to think. This was all he asked. In substance, he wished me to murder the girl I loved. I could refuse. I could ignore his request. I could even doubt the verity of his statements. He might be a madman. But I didn't doubt. I believed every word, and I knew I would do as he asked. That she had gone willingly I didn't doubt. I no longer hated him so much. Rather, I pitied him, the hapless victim of a horrible chain of circumstance. I found the priest, a venerable, gentle soul, after much searching. The younger men had looked at me searchingly, laughed, and told me to read the good book for consolation and to lay off the bottle. Father Kalman was understanding with the wisdom of the very old. "Yes, my son," he said, "I will go. Many might doubt, but I believe. Lucifer roams the earth in many guises and must be recognized and exorcised." It was 5 o'clock in the morning when we approached the mausoleum. The good father explained that the creatures of darkness had to be back in their resting places before the cock crew. At night they drew sustenance. During the morning they slept. There was a gleaming copper casket. Todd had not lied. We approached it warily. In it was nothing but grisly remains, bloodstains, and dust. We drew back, fearful. Then we saw the other, newer casket in richest mahogany, almost twice the width of the copper box. Their bridal bed? They lay together, his arm about her. She wore a gown of palest blue, but oh, that mockery of a gown! Stained it was with fresh blood which had seeped onto it from him. Obviously, she had not taken to prowling yet. His mouth was dark, rich with blood, slightly open in a half-smile. His hand pressed her fair head close to his chest. She lay trustingly within the circle of his arm, like a small child. The priest crossed himself. The bodies twitched slightly. "You know what you must do," Father Kalman whispered. I nodded, the pit of my stomach churning madly. I couldn't do it, not Maria the lovely, but I knew I would. I had to. She must not wake again to see that blood-stained gown or to wonder at her husband's gory lips. She should know rest, eternal rest. Father Kalman circled the box several times, ringing his small bell, and at one point laid a crucifix upon each of their chests. Their faces writhed and I felt my skin creep. Then, chanting in a low, firm voice, the priest gave me the signal. Together we drove 2 long stakes, dipped first in holy water, home, piercing their hearts simultaneously. The bodies leapt forward in the box, straining against the stake, and a horrible, drawn-out wail shattered the stillness of the tomb. The priest dropped to his knees and I clapped my hands over my ears, but the dreadful shriek penetrated. My stomach turned over and I retched. The good father followed suit. We were no supermen, and our bodies and our very souls revolted against this monstrous thing. "Let us finish, my son," the priest said slowly, after a time, his face the color of ashes. "We must bury these dead, that they may sleep in consecrated ground." I couldn't. I had to see her again before it was done. She lay, small and fragile as ever, her face calm, only there was no trace of life now. She was still and white, as only the dead, the truly dead, are. Todd's arm was flung across her chest, as if to protect her. I made myself move the arm, resting her head upon his shoulder where it belonged. Then, as I looked, there was just Maria. Todd was gone, and only a handful of dust lay piled up around the stake. It was enough. I slammed the lid shut. Looking back now, I can see it was all for the best. Ria was different, apart from other women. A dreamer, a mystic, too easily influenced by the bizarre and unnormal. I, on the other hand, am practical almost to a fault. Had she married me, I might have crushed in her the very thing that drew me to her. In time, she might have grown to hate me. Hunter, on the other hand, was a student, introspective, given to romanticizing, susceptible to suggestion. Had I been confronted with an Eve, I should have run like hell. To him, though, she was cloaked in mystery, hence more desirable. What better choice for him ultimately than Ria? That Ria had to die to achieve her happiness is of no real importance. Life is a transitory thing anyway. Sometimes, though, when I look at Ria's picture, it's hard to be practical. She was everything I shall ever want. I had never been to Europe before the summer of 1947. I went to find Maria, to marry her. Instead, I found and murdered her, and I will never go back again. The end. Best Audiobooks for Free hopes that you have enjoyed this production of Each Man Kills by Victoria Glad. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble, as your subscription is the support we need to create more great free content. Please look to our website at bestaudiobooksforfree.com for a complete list of our audiobooks.